But let's continue that conversation we had a bit about backwards compatibility, because that's another important thing that I think needs to be talked about. One major advantage that the PC has been having over the consoles lately is the fact that you do not have to worry about not being able to play your older games once technology improves and hardware advances. Now, there are certain exceptions to that. I know there's some games that, if you have Windows 10, you cannot play some games that run on Windows 7, Vista, XP, whatever. There are just some games that are almost impossible to run on newer Windows systems. But compare that to just flat out not being allowed to play your PS3, PS2, PS1 games on your PS4. Just flat out not being allowed to play any of your older games unless you want to buy the remastered version. Or if you want to buy the PS2 classic games, like San Andreas is on the PS4, but you can only get it digitally, and they don't have the same system that Microsoft has, where if you insert your disc, they don't force you to buy the game again. It downloads the game for you. What Sony decides to do is that, okay, we are going to just say fuck you, and you're going to have to buy the game twice. We don't care if you already own the game. We want the monies. So if you're a Sony guy and you want to play your older games on the PS4, you only really have 3 options. Option 1 is to keep your older consoles around and just play the game on your older console and have all these different fucking consoles lying around, which, for convenience sake, is a pain in the ass. Option 2 is to just buy the game again on the PlayStation Store, assuming that the game's even available on the PlayStation Store, because there are plenty of PlayStation 2 games. The majority of the games that were on the PS2 are not even available to buy. It's really only a select few games like San Andreas, Twisted Metal, Vice City, a few other games that I saw on there. But there's no really iconic PS2 games. They're still missing from that library. So that's option 2. Assuming that it's a game that you want to play, you can buy it again on the PS4 on the digital PlayStation Store. Option 3 is to get PlayStation Now. You have access to all these PS3, PS2 games on demand. No, please. Never, 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 ever. And this is advice that goes to all my subscribers. Never get into PlayStation Now. Never get into these shitty streaming services. These shitty streaming services. We were talking about the gaming crash a while ago and saying that I don't think a gaming crash is likely. Well, if services like PlayStation Now become mainstream to the point that it becomes a common practice in gaming, game streaming, that'll cause the gaming crash. But I'm not going to get into detail about that because I already talked about why game streaming services, if they become mainstream, why it would absolutely kill gaming and why it wouldn't work. So you should check out that video that I made a while ago. A few months ago I made that video. But anyway, if you're a Sony gamer, backwards compatibility is pretty much non-existent. I remember during the PS3 days, they had it at first, but then they took it away. Like, they had it in the PS3. The fat PS3s had it, but not even all of them. Like, if only the 60 gig and the 40 gig version had backwards compatibility with PS2 games. I don't know why the fuck I started like that. I apologize. So Sony were really the ones that started the whole trend of abandoning backwards compatibility. Then Nintendo eventually did it with the Wii U. No GameCube backwards compatibility, even though the Wii had it. You did have Wii backwards compatibility, but yeah, Nintendo started abandoning backwards compatibility. And then Microsoft, Xbox One, no backwards compatibility whatsoever. Thankfully, they've kind of righted that wrong by implementing this backwards compatibility feature, which I think it's a great way to use technology to their advantage. They don't have to have it as a part of their hardware specifically. It's more of a software thing, which is good because if it was a hardware thing, it would raise the price of the console, which was part of the reason why backwards compatibility was killed off by Sony. It's because they wanted to cut costs. They didn't want to have a PS2 emulator. But I know the PS3 had a PS1 emulator, so I guess the PS1 emulator was pretty cheap to do. But I'm just glad that backwards compatibility is starting to make a comeback because backwards compatibility is one of the most important features to me, especially now that the PS4 controller and Xbox One controller they're so much better than their predecessors. I really absolutely hated the PS3 controller. I hated how you had to shoot in first-person shooters with your shoulder buttons. I absolutely hated that. And I just thought it was awkward. I thought the controller was just awkward to me. I also didn't like the 360 controller that much. I thought it was a little bit It was a little bit clunky. I know a lot of people say it was their favorite controller, and at the time, I thought the 360 controller was great. It was much better than the PS3. But then when I was exposed to the Xbox One controller, I was like, oh my god. Now, I keep ripping on the 8th generation of consoles. One thing I will say, Xbox One controller is the greatest controller I've ever used in my life. I will put that out there. PS4 controller is also really good, especially compared to the PS3, but I just prefer the Xbox One controller. But I will tell you, I think I'd be doing a lot more gaming right now than I do if I was allowed to play older games. If I was allowed to play all my PS2 games. If I was allowed to play all my PS3 games in one console. Because I'm not going to take out the consoles and play them again. I just really do not want to do that. It's just too inconvenient for me to take all these consoles out, and I just don't want to do it. You can call it lazy, you can call it whatever you want, but I just don't want 10 fucking consoles lying around all over the place. I just don't want that. It actually got to the point, going back to the whole thing with the controller, that I flat out refused to play my 360 again because I did not want to ever have to use that controller ever again compared to the Xbox One controller. The Xbox One controller is so much better than the 360 that I just couldn't go back. I couldn't do it. I tried to play Black Ops 2 on the 360 before it became backwards compatible. I couldn't do it. Could not do it. So in terms of backwards compatibility, I'm not sure what the future holds. I assume that the future is looking bright due to the enormous success of Microsoft's backwards compatibility program for the Xbox One. They actually expanded so much that now you can play original Xbox games on the Xbox One. So I assume that with the next Xbox, they'll just transfer that software over to the next Xbox. So with Microsoft, you don't really have to worry about backwards compatibility. Hopefully Sony can realize that backwards compatibility is really important to consumers. But knowing Sony, they're probably not going to give a shit because they're already making enough money. They're dominating the competition. Why should they put in backwards compatibility? And that's an absolute fucking shame because my favorite console during the 6th generation was the PS2. Favorite console during the 7th generation was the PS3. And going back to the 5th generation, PS1 was my favorite console. I'd love to go back to some PS1 games also, like Spyro and all these other games. And I shouldn't have to rely on remasters to be able to play these games again, or to dust up my old console and have it collect more space that I really don't have.